During an emergency, timely and clear communication is critical. In today's world, how information is delivered is just as important as what is being said. Mercury Notifications' Enform mass notification system features Field Alert, a dynamic notification platform that performs the functions of a distributed recipient notification system. Field Alert defines how you communicate to individuals and groups in the event of an emergency. Not all individuals interact or communicate in the same manner. So whether inside a facility, around campus, or across the country, Field Alert provides selection and assignment applications to reach 100% of your intended audience 100% of the time. Depending on the type of emergency and the method for triggering communication, from a secured monitored connection, a fire alarm control unit, and/or a push button in a security office, Enform intuitively pushes out communication. With live voice communications through a local or remote microphone or telephone input, pre-recorded audio, and/or text-to-speech, Field Alert is flexible to meet your needs in the ways you need to communicate. Outside of a facility presents communication challenges, but Mercury's Enformed Field Alert gives you even more options. Luckily today, most everyone carries a smartphone. Field Alert allows you to push out text messages, tweets, and/or even pre-recorded voice calls directly to mobile phones. But what about those who don't carry a cell phone or visitors to campus? When covering wide areas outside, Enform can deliver audible messages through loud voice speaker arrays. Inside a facility is another story with its own set of communication devices. Field Alert can provide warnings or information through the Enform overhead paging system or Enform's distributed audio devices, such as Mercury's audio speakers, desktop notifications, email messages, and pre-recorded voice calls through Skype or landlines. For those who are hard of hearing or are in areas with high ambient background sound, Field Alert can communicate through digital signs and strobes. Mercury's Enform Field Alert selection software is part of FieldPop, a cloud-based interface with interactive global monitoring and activation. FieldPop allows you to remotely operate and maintain the mass notification system from anywhere in the world. See Mercury's FieldPop video for more information. Mercury's Enform Field Alert is both a robust enterprise-wide distributed audio system and a distributed recipient notification system that allows you to initiate action through comprehensive communication and coordination based on you and your employees' needs. Mercury. Response-able mass notification.
Great question. And the distinction between a paging mass communication system or a mass notification system is primarily a mass notification system has code and standard built around it. A paging mass communication system is often designed within design guidelines that people have used in the industry. But as far as the expected experience goes for a life safety system, paging system probably doesn't meet in just about any requirement for a standard and code of a life safety system. So there's a huge standard, a huge distinction, I should say, between those systems. One provides standard for things like reach clarity, redundancy, reporting, sort of diagnostics, integration ability, and things of that nature. So it comes down to managing expectations and making sure that expectations are met, where one is a communication system, the other one is really part of a life safety system. When the standards were starting to be built around a life safety mass notification system, The standard folks decided that they would kind of put a mass notification system into three large buckets. So we start off with what they call an on-premise solution. And an on-premise solution is such that where the equipment for a mass notification system would actually live on-premise and potentially be integrated with things like telephony, IT, security, and a fire alarm control unit or other life safety system features, and even a BMS system. So you would have all of this equipment integrated on-premise, in addition to having speakers located or potentially strobes located on-premise to be able to get a congruent life safety message out. There may be integration with things on-premise such as strobes, desktop notification, and even digital signage, and potentially some other things that may initiate a non-fire emergency. So we have an on-premise solution as one bucket. The second bucket would be a wide area bucket, and that is where we put speakers generally on the outside of a building or around a campus. As you can imagine, during certain type of emergencies, you may need to get a message out to the folks that are outside in a parking lot, around campus, or even rally point situations. So wide area is the ability to have speakers and messaging happen outside a building. And then we have something called a distributed recipient mass notification. And DRMNS is the third bucket. And that is where we get a congruent message that works with the audio system. But we get a message to each individual that may be in somebody's Active Directory. And so we would send out texts, we would send out emails, we would send out phone calls. We would be part of social media to get emergency information to people. So no matter where they're going or what's happening, they would get a complete message. So an end-to-end solution starts with a system that can do on-prem, wide area, and distributed recipient mass node, while also integrating with a life safety system that may be a fire alarm or a BMS system, telephony, as I mentioned before, microphones, and other initiating devices. So an end-to-end solution would encompass the ability to do all of those things. All of that stuff, when it comes to monitoring and supervision, is part of the code. So in order for a system really to meet code and meet the UL 2572 mass notification standard, a system has to, of course, be supervised. So for instance, if you have head-end equipment, if you have amplifiers, if you have speakers, if you have connections to other life safety components, from end to end, everything needs to have the ability to be supervised so that we know that the system is actually working. As you can imagine, again, a distinction between potentially a paging system or a mass communication system is that those systems may not have supervision. And so during a life safety situation, that system may not perform as expected. Compare that with a system that meets standard and code. We have the ability to ensure that one, the system is working. Two, if there is a compromise to the system, there should be a couple of fallbacks. One, we should have some fault monitoring. And fault monitoring may be just a simple email that goes to facilities of security or a person in charge of the mass notification system. It may be tied into the fire alarm control unit and have 24-hour offsite supervision as well. But the point being is we need to know that the system is either working or what the compromise is and where it is so that we can fix it immediately and deal with the risk assessment of such a failure. And then, of course, we should have redundancy with a system, and that would be the second part that we need to make sure that happens. So for instance, if an audio cable gets disrupted, let's make sure that we have a redundant path so that audio can continue throughout the whole system 100% of the time. It starts off with knowing that you have the ability to meet a risk assessment plan. Two is to meet the expectations of the engineers, the designers, the users, and the owners. Oftentimes, what happens when you put in the system, if you don't meet expectations of the above, then you would have a system that isn't working properly. So we start off by essentially, again, as just a floor to get a successful system in place, is to make sure that you have a system that meets standard and code. So now we know you have a mass notification system. So we start there. Then we have to get into things like reach. We have to reach 100% of our intended audience 100% of the time. We have to have clarity. There are intelligibility standards in a life safety system for mass notification. So we must meet those standards to ensure that people are understanding the message. And clarity comes in the form of audio, and it can come in the form of course, digital signage and other methods as well. Then we have to have redundancy, as I mentioned in the earlier answer, to ensure that a system is always working properly. We need to have the ability for reporting, reporting to a system for diagnostics, and potentially reporting for other analytics within the system. So for instance, an area of refuge is a device that you would put in a mass notification system. You could put in a classroom, you could put in an elevator lobby, a stairwell. In a system, you may have an occupancy sensor that could actually develop information to determine if an evacuation has actually been successfully met, or a lockdown situation, where are your people? So to have reporting and the ability to do all of that would help be a successful system. But then we get on to the real parts of success. And this is the thing that I think is super important. Integration and maintainability of a system, in my book, once you've met standard and the robustness of a system, is literally everything. So one of the challenges that engineers or integrators or owners may face is having the ability to have successful integration with telephony, with IT, and with all the other pieces that may hang onto a life safety system. So we need to ensure that we have the ability to integrate appropriately, properly, and in a robust way. And then, of course, having an intuitive user interface. So it's not enough just to have a great system, but it's important that people can configure, reconfigure, use cloud services, initiate a system, and manage a system. So by meeting code and standard, that's the floor. Getting all the way through a successful installation so that we reach 100% of our intended audience 100% of the time is the reason we put a mass notification system in. And then closing the loop on the user experience and meeting expectations becomes a successful situation and a successful project. So we have run into, I don't want to say everything because it's always something you've never seen, but suffice it to say, just about everything. So with our systems, we have an open control protocol, and that open control protocol meets the ANSI standards for openness. And we start there. So we can actually talk to over 140 controlled protocols out there. And then, of course, we have boxes that will integrate with digital inputs, digital outputs. Of course, everything is supervised. So we can talk to any initiating device, any fire alarm control unit, or any other system. We can talk over IP, we can talk over serial. So these become the things that allow for that remarkable integration. And then, of course, we have APIs, which probably puts us in the unlimited ability to talk to any system. And the APIs is the thing that where the magic happens, because someone will have a really intelligent system. They'll have this great feature function as part of a BMS or a life safety system. And the engineers and us can integrate very easily and bring information into intelligence. And so that becomes all important. And then, of course, just to have things like a SIP box so that we can integrate with digital phones. And digital phones can do a remarkable number of things for campus abilities. So, for instance, we could have a phone or a microphone or initiating device actually create a lockdown message in one building while generating an evacuation message congruently to the other buildings, all together. So every building subscribes to one another. Every building is listening to one another. We have boxes that can talk to legacy systems for audio. So oftentimes when a mass notification system is going into a building, An owner may have a paging system or an audio system that they're like, hey, we don't really want to change this portion out, but we're updating this portion of our building. Can we make sure that audio can go back and forth? And so that's part of integration as well. So we're prepared to integrate with just about anything that's out there for a successful installation. The reason it's important is simply this. Again, it's managing expectations, but as a manufacturer, I think all of us good manufacturers out here, we go through a lot of efforts to eliminate risk to anyone in the channel, anyone who's an engineer, and of course owners. And the way that you can eliminate risk is making sure that your systems are listed by a nationally recognized testing laboratory to meet the standard for the job it's intended to do. And so there's a lot of effort on that, and it allows, I think, people to really understand what it is that they're buying, because most of us, when we're buying something outside of our understanding, which could be fire code, which could be implementation, integration, could be the robustness of a system. You can easily put a box into electrical closet or fire closet and not understand that a box of electronics could create an electromagnetic field or interference, and could really interfere with some other system that's important. So by meeting standard and code, we've gone through the steps to ensure the safety of not just our equipment, but the safety of the integration and the safety of the use for the occupants. Because after all, what we're protecting are people, property, and company brands. And so by meeting standard and code, people can ensure that they're putting their best abilities forward to do exactly the same.